So the question is it possible to take someone who isn't instinctively a giver and turn them into one? Or will they always continue never to disappoint? The other thing that Trevor says, which I think is also a truism, is that the strength of a campaign doesn't depend on the donors, but on the askers. And when we look around our campaigns, I think the effective ones and the successful ones are those campaigns which really can rely on a body of askers who are out there and doing the business. We're very lucky to have with us today to lead this discussion Paul, Kane and Marc Terrill. We're going to start with Paul, who is going to share his thoughts for the next 15 minutes or so, and then Marc will step up, and then we'll open up to discussion. Briefly, to give you a sense of who the guys are that are talking this morning, Paul is regarded as one of today's foremost professionals in Jewish communal service. I'm sure many of you know him and have come across and worked with Paul. He's enjoyed a distinguished 35-year career in the Federation movement. Paul's early career involved working with teenagers and college students, but ultimately he moved into the direction of financial resource development. As Executive Director of the Young Leadership Division of the Jewish United Fund of Metropolitan Chicago, he combined his fundraising expertise with his background in leadership development, and in 1988 became that organization's Associate Campaign Director. In 1989, Paul became the Director of Trades and Professions at UJA Federation of New York, and assumed increasing responsibility for fundraising, eventually serving as Director of the annual campaign, and since as Senior Vice President for Financial Resource Development. He oversaw a community-wide effort in that role that has raised billions of dollars for the Jewish people. And in Paul's current role as Senior Advisor to the President and CEO of JFNA, he continues to share the wealth of experience and knowledge with colleagues at JFNA and in communities throughout the Federation system. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Doug. You know, the first rule of fundraising, you said Trevor raised the first $1 million gift. Herb Friedman. You know, the answer is sure, even if it's not true. From a fundraising standpoint, you don't make people feel bad, you make them feel good. Why fundraising? And this is the most important thing. You know, every organization, especially federations, some federations in the States say they're a fundraising organization, others will say not. I want to make it clear. We're fundraisers for one reason only. It's for what we do with the resources we raise. That can't be lost. We can't strengthen Jewish community without fundraising, without raising funds. We can't build for the future without raising funds. We can't exist without raising funds. So fundraising is done to allows us to do the job that we care about and take care of the Jewish people. So I have some questions for you. Who has raised funds in this room? Show your hands. Almost everybody. Great. Who has solicited a gift in this room? We got less. We got about half the room. Who has solicited a gift over $10,000? We've got the same amount. Who has asked for a gift over $100,000? A little bit smaller. So, Marc, we have our work cut out for us here. As you know, between Marc and I, we have about 60 years of fundraising experience. Marc about 59, me a year or two. But we'll make do. Just so we can take a couple minutes, what do you want to get out of this session so make sure we're on target? Anybody, what did you want to learn? Any new methodologies, okay. What? Do's and don'ts, okay, great. You can explain that a little bit?
Well, the Federation is supporting or funding an avatar organisation. What do they want back in return? Apart from excellent reporting and, you know, transparency and
Okay.
What else do they want?
Okay. Other thoughts? What does what? What do donors want? Okay, very important. What else? We're going to try to answer some of those questions throughout the presentation. The way we've worked this, I'm going to just lead up some opening remarks. Marc's going to get into the guts of major gifts fundraising. Then we're just going to open up for questions. We do have a lot of experience, and we have a lot of war stories to talk about if you'd like, and we can just interact. So that's the way we've formalized this session. We live in a world that literally is the most richest, affluent Jewish community at any time in our existence. It's very, very important. I remember 20 years ago when everybody was going, oh my God, there's going to be no Jewish money, all Jews will become lawyers and doctors, and they don't have the same capacity as they were at entrepreneurs and building their own companies. Well, Jews have a certain innate ability to raise money. One of the things I did in New York is worked with the hedge fund world, which is very strongly Jewishly influenced, as well as Wall Street. And right now, the New York UJA Federation campaign, which is about 150 million, give or take, any given year, comes from, 1/3 comes from Wall Street, comes from financial world. So this is the most affluent world of Jewish living. Doesn't mean there's not Jewish poor. And, you know, anybody who's read the new Jewish study in New York, it just came out, shows about 400,000 people who are living at or below the poverty line, which is an enormous number. But there's incredible wealth, and there's incredible generosity. Fortunately, unfortunately, the great wealth of Jews spread their money around to both Jewish and non-Jewish causes. But there is plenty of money to go around to help. So what's the climate? The climate out there is the competition. 2010, this is an unbelievable number. In the United States, $290 billion was raised for not-for-profits. $290 billion in 2010. That's a huge, huge number. And it's been a steady incline depending on what's going on in the world. So that's the climate we're in. And it's important to see that. So anybody who says, well, the money's not out there, not true. It's just a matter of developing the right strategies and the right techniques to tap into that money. And those are some of the things Marc will get into. If not, we'll talk about it afterwards. When it comes to raising money from Israel, that's actually a very challenging situation right now. It's changed. When I first got into Jewish communal life, you know, Israel was always at major risk. It was not a rich country, and it was much easier to raise money. Today, people perceive Israel, in its reality, as one of the richest countries in the world, and they have less need for Jewish money. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole partnership and what it means to be Jewish, but that's part of the climate. Then you have the people either from the left or from the right doesn't like something about Israel. So you're always fighting some objection of why I don't want to give to Israel. So that's just a couple examples of climate, of what we're dealing with. There's different types of fundraising. Right? We're going to focus on major gifts in a minute. There's community-based fundraising. That includes direct mail. It's all mass stuff. It's usually under $500. It's telegiving. It's web-based fundraising. Or it's a combination of. On the tables, and there's some more on the other tables that we haven't gone to, there's a checklist. And there's a little do's and don'ts. It's just, I picked it out of my files of, over these two tables, 6 and 5, there's a couple extras. Just for you to look at in your own work to try to determine how you're doing and all the different subject matters. So that's the community-based. Then there's event-based. Who does event-based fundraising here? Event-based. Event. That's a major piece of fundraising. It usually includes an honoree, and it can be very successful. It can be very successful, but it's very time-consuming. But, you know, the experience I have, you get the right honoree, you can raise millions of dollars in that event. Now, you can do it on a small scale and still raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. As long as your investment is not as large, you're doing okay. Then there's affinity focused. What do I mean by affinity focused? Women. It's great grouping to raise money. The line of Judah, those who don't know what a line of Judah pin is, most people know, it's one of the greatest marketing tools that the Jewish community ever created. And, you know, it's 5,000 or 6,000 depending on your community, and it's a sense of pride that women wear. To organize around women and women's philanthropy is a good, smart way of raising money. Young leadership, next generation. Two things about the next generation. One, some of the most affluent people today, whether in the high-tech world, web-based work, or even in hedge funds and Wall Street, people are under 40. If you question the accent about 40, I park my car in Harvard Yard, and I'm part of the Red Sox Nation continuation, so I don't pronounce ours. So just a little disclaimer. So two groups. The young leadership have tremendous, tremendous potential. Some of these people are running billion-dollar companies, and they have great wealth. The second thing is the more mass young leadership. It's our responsibility to teach them what it means to give. What does it mean to give a meaningful gift? That I give up one night, one weekend night on the town and put that towards charity. So it's a matter of teaching the next generation, and that's incredibly important. Of all the work we do, we need to make sure we cultivate the next generation so they're also contributors to us. Then there's different professions that some people fundraise, lawyers, doctors, the financial world, as I said, and depending on your community, can be broken down in any different way. So what are the types of fundraising we talked about in the beginning? It's face-to-face. One-on-one. Two, we use here in the States missions to Israel, missions to the former Soviet Union. At the end of a mission, we do a technique called caucus. Everybody know what a caucus is? Not everybody knows. Does anybody not know what a caucus is? Okay, this is a few years. So what happens at a caucus? On a mission, you take people, you travel and see the needs. You go from 7 o'clock in the morning, you finish at 12 o'clock at night. You do it for 5 or 6 days, and then you sit around in a room, and you talk about what it means to you. And people announce your gift. I've seen some most incredible emotion comes out of a caucus. It's an amazing, powerful tool. So we're trying to get as many people traveling with us to go and use the caucus as our fundraising tool. What do we use our money for? Money can be used in a lot of different ways. One, it's the unrestricted gift. To us in Federation world, that's the highest level. Someone gives us a gift and trusts us and our volunteers to use the money the most effective way. So that's the key piece. Then there's the whole thing of designated gift, targeting gift, and the whole planned giving, which we're not going to get into at all today, but a planned gift for the future. And that's very, very significant giving. So that takes us up to the last piece, and that's major gift giving. And that, believe it or not, is the smartest way and the most inexpensive way to raise money is through a major gifts effort. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Marc to get us into that a little.
And while Marc's taking his place, just to give you a brief introduction about Marc. Marc is the president of the Associated Jewish Community Federation of Baltimore, In his professional leadership role, Marc directs the day-to-day management and operations, as well as the long-range planning for the associated federation, with primary emphasis on development of human and financial resources for the federation and its agencies. He's a graduate of the University of Florida, obtained his master's in social work with a concentration in community organization from the Wurzweiler School of Social Work at Yeshiva University. Marc received an honorary doctorate degree from the Baltimore Hebrew University and holds continuing education certificates in management and leadership from the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania, as well as Harvard. Marc's a graduate of the first class of the Jewish Federations of North America's Mandel Executive Development Program in 1997, which is a program designed to prepare those who were identified as, at that time, the next generation of Jewish non-profit chief executive officers. He serves on the boards LifeBridge Health Systems, Baltimore Community Foundation, and Sinai and Northwest Hospitals, to name a few, and is the incoming president for the Jewish Communal Service Association. Married to Diana, clinical psychologist, and has 3 children, his daughter Maddie, and twins Ellie and Samantha.
Thank you, Doug. Okay, so a couple of things that I wanted to mention, and I'm going to focus in Paul did at a very high level, a very macro level. The question that Paul started with is why fundraising? And those that work with me in Baltimore, they know that my mantra is that hopes and dreams without the financial resources are delusions. That unless we raise the money in order to advance whatever you're working on, we're not going to be able to move agenda. So when Doug asked the question of why the session is called Art and not Science, because the fact of the matter is 90% of what we do is artful. The 10% that is the science of resource development is exactly what Paul said. We know by empirical data that if a person meets with an individual face to face, you will get exponentially larger gifts than events, telephone, whatever it might be. So we're talking about the realm of major gifts development, and we know what works, and that's individual engagement with individual prospective donors. So who is the audience? You have to know it can't be fire, ready, aim. You need to know who you're going to go to for those major gifts. And for the purpose of this session, let's say that those gifts are at $10,000 or whatever the currency and above. So the markets that you want to try to attract are really fourfold. One is individuals that have the capacity to give at that level. And other is foundations, again, that have the capacity to give at that level. The third is corporations. And corporations will give to you based on their straight gift giving and also for marketing and exposure. So in Baltimore, for example, there's a bank called PNC Bank that gives us $150,000 per annum. And what they get is they get their logo on our website. So for them, that's worth a lot of money. So they don't have to advertise on 17 billboards throughout our community. They can advertise on our website and have that market penetration. And the fourth audience, believe it or not, is government. We raise a ton of money. And it doesn't matter if you're from Israel or the UK or the States. If you are developing and promoting the right product, you can get individuals, foundations, corporations, and government to buy into that product. So now, with those 4 markets, who are you going to go to? In Baltimore, we have a very defined audience. We know who the people are that have the capacity to give major gifts. We've researched, we've gone to other institutions, we've gathered names. But if you don't have that, and say that you're working on a center for people with disabilities, how do you get a list of prospects that you could potentially move? You can get it by listservs of people that have a certain affinity. You can get it from a number of different ways. But the fact of the matter is that you have to define who your prospect list is so that it's not fire, ready, aim, as I mentioned. So now in terms of the before work on major gifts development, and if you have any questions while we're going through this, please ask. First of all, you have to have the for the major gifts encounter, your intelligence. You need to know who your prospect is, what motivates them, what influences them. Does the major gift prospect, do they give as a family? Is there a husband and wife that are both making decision making? For example, one thing that is sometimes problematic is that we, by admission, there are some people, this is a very elementary mistake that's made, go and solicit the husband and thinking that the wife potentially has no influence on that gift. And obviously that's flawed thinking. So you have to know who in that family is driving the decision making on that particular gift. Knowing their motivators, knowing their social connections, knowing the human and financial and other variables that factor into their equation. Again, bringing it back to a practical in Baltimore, if I know that there's a major gifts prospect that was just approached by Johns Hopkins University, and they gave a couple $1 million to Johns Hopkins University, I might factor that into my timing of when I ask them for a gift, of how much I might ask them for, et cetera, et cetera. So knowing the prospect, knowing the variables, and then calculating, which I think is very important, the emotional, spiritual, and intellectual gain that that particular donor will receive from making a gift to your particular organization. Again, people want to feel good. They want to feel like they're moving agenda, and you need to be thinking in terms, as Paul said, never has a Jewish community been as affluent, wealthy, had the access and education that we do now. We can't be afraid and timid to ask for gifts of that magnitude, of $10,000, $100,000, $1 million. First of all, we're not asking for ourselves. We're asking for people that rely on us to be the mouthpiece and advocates for them. I'm sorry, you had a question, I believe. Okay, so the during, in terms of the solicitation and cultivation and stewardship, you have to develop a trusting relationship. That's first and foremost. If you think that you're going to come in and receive a major gift from somebody on the first encounter, you're mistaken. You have to invest in that relationship and develop that trust. And the other ingredient is authenticity. People are not stupid. If they feel like you're just engaging with them to basically pick their pocket, then you're going to lose. If you invest in that relationship, you use all the assets on the ground that you have available to you. And what I mean by that is, to me, the art of major gifts giving is not about solicitation. It's about cultivation, stewardship, and then solicitation. So I might bring somebody to one of our agencies and meet some of the recipients of service. Next, I might bring them to meet with our chair of the board and develop that rapport so they know that we have good governance. Next, I might invite them for Shabbat dinner and deepen the relationship I have with them. Next, I might involve them in some community event that we have that showcases the utility and reach and efficacy of what we do as an organization. And then the crescendo is, once the trusting relationships is there, then I'll conduct a solicitation. So in moving into the solicitation phase, I'm also, and I don't know, we can debate this later, I tend to be realistic in how I make assessments of asking people for money. For example, there's a gentleman who's well known, he's the mayor of New York, Michael Bloomberg, who's a billionaire. He has a connection to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. He's a major donor in New York. He gives a lot of money a number of different places. Billionaire, he has the capability of making $1 million plus gifts. But I knew that if I went to Michael Bloomberg and asked for $1 million gift for Hopkins Hillel, he was not going to respond. So instead of going to and using an unrealistic, based on what I know, he has a limited connection to Baltimore, he cares about Hopkins somewhat, I went in my calculation and I thought, I'm not going to ask for an inflated number, I'm going to ask for a realistic number. And we asked for $250,000, and at the end of some negotiation, we received that gift. So again, realistic as opposed to idealistic. And always working towards, and this is the mantra of a development professional, is always working towards the win-win. Again, none of this is contrived. And when when Paul asked the question about how many people have raised over $10,000 or been involved in solicitations, I want to ask another question. How many of you have anxiety about asking people for that amount of money, of $10,000 and above? Okay. I'm gonna ask that you do some self-reflection and some discussion about that with trusted volunteers or trusted colleagues, because it's something that you have to get over. Again, you're not asking for yourself. You're asking for recipients of service and for your agencies that are relying on you to be that mouthpiece. So the piece that I wanted to move into is after the solicitation, because if you receive the money, it's not done then. You have to be involved in donor fulfillment. So when you ask the question about what do you expect from a grantee, what donors expect, and federations are intermediaries, what they expect is to be thanked, honored, recognized, updated, told about the utility and reach of how their gift made a difference, and remain in genuine contact. If development with major donors is episodic, meaning once or maybe twice a year, you are not going to sustain that gift over the long run. If it's continuous and it's authentic and it's based on a trusting relationship, and again, guilty, this might be contrived, but the top 50 donors in Baltimore, Maryland, they're on my BlackBerry of calling them at a minimum once a month to tell them about a trip I just took to Israel or to Odessa, to say happy birthday to them, whatever it is, so that they become part of the social fabric of our organization. That's about sustainability and about development of major gifts and trusting relationships. So again, not episodic, that it's sustained. The other thing that, and I'm going to close really with this, and then we'll open it up for any kind of questions that you have, is that in your organizations, everybody has to see themselves as a development professional. It's got to be a culture of development, because I can tell you that if you have a person that answers the phone and isn't respectful or is off-putting, or you have a person that when they call the finance department and they're checking a pledge amount that they're refuting or disputing, and they're dealt with in a way that's off-putting, you will lose that donor forever. So again, back to the Baltimore model. We bring everybody into staff development meetings. Everybody understands that they're part of the development team, and that's first and foremost what we're looking to champion, because without the financial resources, again, hopes and dreams are delusions if we don't have the financial resources. So Paul mentioned about unrestricted capital, endowment, again, highest form unrestricted, because the organization is entrusted to use that money however the organization's leadership sees fit, designated for certain areas of concentration. Some people, they don't want to give unrestricted. They want to just give to the thing that they want to be able to advance. Capital for buildings and infrastructure, because programs typically happen in buildings, and endowment so that they can leave a legacy over the long haul. So again, major gifts campaigning, I'm an incrementalist when it comes to this. I try to get people to come in by hopefully giving an unrestricted gift. Then if they have what I find out about them, they love youth programming, sending kids to Israel. Then I'll talk to them about a designated gift, and then at some juncture, talk to them about a capital gift. So I'm hitting all streams of revenue, but I'm not doing it all at one time. Now, Paul might have a different experience on integrated ask, and all of you might have a different experience. I find, again, every encounter and every interaction is high touch. It's not high tech. I'm not relating to people through the internet or email or whatever. It's really pressing the flesh and getting to know somebody. So the sum total is, even though Paul said that it's probably one of the cheapest ways in order to raise big money, it's also very labor intensive. So you have to be very much, what was it yesterday, a juggler on the roof, deploying your assets. That one day somebody, agency executive will take this particular prospect to an agency to see a certain service. And I'll call them and follow up and say, how was it? And then we'll talk about what they liked, what they didn't like, and we'll talk about the next move. In in development nomenclature, again, if there's anything scientific, people have made a lot of money as consultants on models called moves management, that you have to have a development plan for prospects doing exactly what I said, of what those encounters are going to be, and that basically every meeting has, for the development professional, has an agenda. Whether it's trust building, whether it's setting the ground for a future ask, whether it's talking about involvement of their children, again, for gift sustainability. So all that's integrated into the plan. So, Doug, with that, I think what we'll do is just turn it over to